The plasma round screamed past Queen Liara's head as her flagship Sovereign Dawn shuddered under concentrated fire from the Kethvar armada. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in crimson as her tactical officer's voice cut through the chaos. Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, Your Majesty. We've lost main engines. Liara gripped her command throne, watching the view screen fill with angular Kethvar destroyers. Each vessel bristled with weapons that had already claimed half her fleet. The human colonies of Kepler 442 burned behind them, millions of souls depending on her next decision. Status of the evacuation ships, she demanded. Still loading civilians, ma'am? They need 12 more minutes. 12 minutes they didn't have. The lead Kethvar dreadnought powered its siege cannon, the weapon that could crack a moon. Liara felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders like lead armor. 3 years of war had brought humanity to this moment. Total annihilation or desperate sacrifice. Commander Torres, she called to her chief tactical officer, a scarred veteran who'd fought the Kethvar since first contact. Options? Torres studied his console, face grim. We could ram the dreadnought. Our remaining antimatter would take out their flagship and maybe buy the evacuation fleet time to jump. Casualties? Everyone aboard, Your Majesty. 800 souls. Liara closed her eyes. The mathematics of leadership were always brutal. Sacrifice hundreds to save millions. But as she prepared to give the order, a new voice spoke from behind her. There's another way. She spun to see a young man in maintenance coveralls standing near the emergency repair station. Brown hair, calloused hands, the kind of face that belonged in engineering bays instead of throne rooms. Somehow he'd reached the most secure area of the ship. "Security!" Torres barked. "Wait." Lyra raised her hand. Something in the stranger's eyes held her attention. Not fear or desperation, but quiet certainty. "How did you get here?" Emergency access shaft from the damaged sections. The Kethvar boarding parties missed it. He stepped forward, ignoring the weapons trained on him. "Your Majesty, I know their ship design. I was a prisoner on their mining stations for 2 years. The bridge fell silent, except for the rumble of dying engines and distant explosions. Lyra had heard of the mining prisoners. Humans worked to death in Kethvar asteroid operations. Few survived. None had ever escaped. "What's your name?" she asked. "Thanks to your grace." Marcus Webb, formerly of the mining ship Iron Cardinal. She recognized that vessel. Lost 3 years ago to Kethvar raiders. The Cardinal was destroyed with all hands. Marcus shook his head. Captured, not destroyed. They kept the engineers alive for slave labor. I learned their language, their technology, their weaknesses. He gestured at the view screen. That dreadnought has a critical flaw. Another impact shook the ship. Torres glanced at his readouts. Structural integrity at 40%. If we're going to ram... Tell me, Liara interrupted, her eyes locked on Marcus. Tell me about this flaw. Marcus moved to the tactical display, his fingers dancing over unfamiliar controls with surprising skill. A schematic of the Kethvar dreadnought appeared, rotating slowly. He highlighted a section near the vessel's core. Their antimatter containment relies on magnetic field generators here, and here. Red dots mark the locations, but they're vulnerable to a specific frequency disruption, something they never bothered shielding because no other species knew about it. Can we generate that frequency? Not with your main weapons. But if someone could get close enough with a modified quantum communicator set to broadcast on the right wavelength, Marcus met her gaze. The containment would fail. Their own antimatter would destroy them from within. Torres leaned over the display. That's a suicide mission. Even our fastest shuttle couldn't penetrate their defensive screen. It wouldn't need to. Marcus pulled up another schematic, one of the human scout ships. These have stealth capabilities. One person, properly shielded, could get through. Liara studied the plan, her tactical mind racing through probabilities and consequences. It was insane, but it might work. You'd be volunteering for certain death. Better than hiding in repair shafts while humanity burns. The sincerity in his voice struck her like a physical blow. Here stood a man who'd lost everything to the Kethvar, suffered in their mines, escaped against impossible odds, and now, offered his life to save strangers. "If you succeed," she said slowly, "if you somehow pull this off and survive, I'll grant you any reward within my power to give." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with those steady brown eyes. When he spoke, his words carried a conviction that surprised everyone on the bridge. "Then I ask for your hand in marriage, Your Majesty." The silence stretched like a held breath. Torres's jaw dropped. The bridge crew exchanged stunned glances. Even as explosions echoed through the hull and humanity faced extinction, the audacity of the request left them speechless. Liara stared at this maintenance worker who'd just proposed to the Queen of Humanity while volunteering for a suicide mission. Logic demanded she refuse, but something deeper, primal, responded to his courage. "Complete the mission," she said finally, "and we'll discuss terms." The HFY weapons charged for another barrage. Time was running out, and Marcus Webb, former prisoner, would-be hero, unexpected suitor, prepared to change the course of human history. Marcus moved with practiced efficiency through the shuttle bay as technicians modified the quantum communicator under Torres's supervision. The device hummed with unstable energy, its housing barely containing frequencies that could tear apart subatomic bonds. "Shielding is minimal," Torres warned. "Radiation exposure will be lethal within minutes of activation. How long do I need?" 40 seconds of sustained broadcast, but you'd have to be within 500 meters of their containment system. Marcus nodded, accepting the death sentence without flinching. Queen Liara watched from the observation deck, studying this stranger who'd disrupted every protocol by reaching her bridge. Her security chief had already confirmed his identity. Marcus Webb, engineer, survivor of brutal captivity, somehow possessed of impossible knowledge about alien technology. "Your Majesty," Torres appeared beside her, "I've analyzed his plan. The physics are sound, but the execution." He shook his head. "Even if he penetrates their defenses, the Dreadnought's point defense systems will shred any approach." "What aren't you telling me?" Torres hesitated. "Our intelligence suggests the HFY use human prisoners as shield operators on their capital ships. If Marcus is right about their mining operations, if other crews were taken alive, the implication hit her like cold steel. Marcus might be flying into a ship crewed partly by enslaved humans. People who'd been written off as dead, now forced to serve their captors. The moral complexity made her head spin. "Launch sequence initiated," the flight controller announced. Scout vessel Prometheus prepped for immediate departure. Liara descended to the shuttle bay, her royal guard forming a protective corridor. Marcus stood beside the sleek scout ship, its hull gleaming with stealth coatings. Up close, she noticed details she'd missed on the bridge. Scars on his hands from mining equipment, the lean build of someone who'd survived on starvation rations, eyes that had seen too much. "Why?" she asked simply. He understood the question. "I had a sister on Kepler 442, Elena. She'd be in one of those evacuation ships now, if she's still alive." Marcus adjusted the quantum communicator's harness across his chest. "But even if she's not, those are human children aboard those transports. Human families. They deserve a chance." "That doesn't explain your request." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You want honesty? For 2 years, I survived by holding on to something impossible. The idea that I might somehow, someday, be worthy of someone like you? Crazy, right? A mining slave, dreaming of a queen. Marcus, I know it's insane. I know it breaks every rule of protocol and common sense. But facing death?" He shrugged. "Might as well aim high." The sovereign dawn lurched as another barrage struck home. Emergency klaxons wailed. Through the bay's atmospheric shield, they could see the evacuation ships still loading civilians, vulnerable and exposed. "Time to go," Torres called. Marcus climbed into the scout ship's cockpit, hands steady on controls he shouldn't have known how to operate. Liara found herself stepping closer to the ship, something inexplicable drawing her forward. "If I survive this," she said quietly, "if by some miracle you make it back, we'll have that discussion. But Marcus, don't die for a dream. Die for them." She nodded toward the evacuation fleet. "Yes, Your Majesty." The scout ship lifted smoothly, its engines barely whispering. Within moments, the stealth coating rendered it nearly invisible against the starfield. On the bridge displays, they tracked its progress as a faint sensor ghost moving through the Kethavar formation. "Clever," Torres murmured. "He's using their own ship wakes to mask his approach, riding the turbulence from their engines." The lead dreadnought grew larger on the screen, its angular bulk bristling with weapon emplacements. Point defense turrets swept methodically, searching for threats. Marcus's ship appeared as nothing more than space debris, drifting with perfect passivity. 400 meters, the sensor operator reported. 300, 250. Suddenly, the scout ship's engines flared to life. Marcus had abandoned stealth for speed, racing toward the dreadnought's hull in a desperate final approach. Point defense systems locked onto him immediately, filling space with lethal crossfire. "He's hit!" Torres shouted. Starboard engine gone, but Marcus kept flying, the wounded ship spiraling toward the alien vessel's core. At the last possible moment, the quantum communicator activated. Its signal blazed across all frequencies, a sustained scream of disruptive energy that penetrated the dreadnought's hull. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the Kethvar ship began to shudder. Internal explosions rippled along its length as antimatter containment fields collapsed in cascade failure. The point defense systems fell silent. Emergency lights flickered and died. "It worked," someone whispered. The dreadnought erupted in a sphere of annihilating light that briefly outshone the local star. When the glare faded, nothing remained but expanding plasma clouds and debris. The surrounding Kethvar vessels, caught in the explosion's edge, drifted powerless and dark. All evacuation ships report successful jump to hyperspace, communications announced. 7 million civilians confirmed safe. Liara stared at the dissipating fireball, searching for any sign of Marcus's ship. The scout vessel had been at the epicenter of the explosion. Nothing could have survived that release of energy. "Ma'am," the sensor operator's voice trembled with excitement. "I'm reading a faint transponder signal. Bearing 27 Mark 4. On the screen, a tiny object tumbled through space. The scout ship's escape pod, its hull scarred but intact. Inside, Marcus Webb drifted unconscious but alive, protected by the very alien shielding technology he'd learned during 2 years of captivity. The mathematics of leadership were indeed brutal, Liara reflected. But sometimes, just sometimes, they allowed for miracles. Recovery teams located the escape pod drifting in the debris field 6 hours later. Marcus had suffered severe radiation exposure, internal injuries, and mild neurological damage from the explosion. But he lived, the first human to survive direct exposure to Kethvar antimatter detonation. Liara waited outside the medical bay as doctors worked to stabilize him. Her first minister, an elderly woman named Celeste Marsh, approached with obvious concern. "Your Majesty, we need to discuss the implications of his request." "Which implications?" Liara kept her eyes on the medical bay doors. "All of them. Constitutional, diplomatic, practical. The crown hasn't contracted a marriage outside noble bloodlines in 300 years. Parliament will demand hearings. The other human worlds will question your judgment. He saved 7 million lives, yes, and we're grateful. But gratitude doesn't constitute grounds for marriage to a commoner, especially one with no background verification, no family connections, no political value." Liara finally turned to face her longtime advisor. "What do you know about him?" Celeste consulted her tablet. "Marcus Webb, age 22. Born on agricultural world Demeter 7. Parents died in a mining accident when he was 16. Sister Elena Webb Chen, married, 2 children. Currently residing on Kepler 4. 4-2 confirmed alive and evacuated. Marcus joined the Merchant Marine, served on 12 different vessels before assignment to the Iron Cardinal. No criminal record, no political affiliations, no significant assets. And during his captivity, that's where it gets interesting." Celeste swiped to another screen. Kethvar mining operations are designed to break human spirits through systematic brutality. Average survival time is 14 months. Marcus lasted 24 months and somehow retained enough technical knowledge to engineer today's victory. What does that tell you about his character? That he's either exceptionally strong-willed or completely insane. The medical bay doors slid open. Doctor? Sarah Park emerged, her expression cautiously optimistic. He's stable. Radiation damage was significant but manageable. He's asking for you, Your Majesty. Liara entered the sterile chamber where Marcus lay connected to various monitoring systems. His skin showed the pale cast of radiation sickness, but his eyes remained alert. Did it work? He asked. Immediately, 7 million people reached safety because of you. He nodded, closing his eyes briefly. Elena? Kavia. Safe. Her family was on the 3rd evacuation ship. Good. When he looked at her again, humor flickered in his expression. So about that discussion? Despite everything, the battle, the political implications, the sheer impossibility of his request, Liara found herself smiling. You're serious. Deadly serious. I know it's complicated. I know there are protocols and procedures and probably laws against it, but I also know that life is short and unpredictable, and sometimes you have to take risks that make everyone think you're crazy. Marriage to me would make you a target for every political faction in human space. Assassins, kidnappers, ambitious nobles who think they have better claims. Your life would never be your own again. Your life isn't your own either, Marcus pointed out. You carry responsibility for billions of people, make decisions that determine who lives and dies, deal with threats most humans never imagine. Why wouldn't you want someone who understands sacrifice? The question struck deeper than Liara expected. For 15 years she had ruled alone, surrounded by advisors and courtiers, but ultimately isolated by the weight of leadership. Every relationship had been calculated, political, temporary. What makes you think you understand me? I don't, Marcus admitted, but I'd like the chance to try. Look, I'm not asking you to fall in love with me tomorrow. I'm asking for the opportunity to prove I'm worth your time, worth your consideration. And if I say no, then I'll accept that answer and find some other way to serve humanity. Maybe join the fleet or work on refugee resettlement. Whatever you think best. Doctor? Park cleared her throat delicately. Your Majesty, the patient needs rest. His neural patterns are still stabilizing from the quantum radiation exposure. Liara stood to leave, then paused. Marcus, you ask for any reward within my power to give. Are you certain this is what you want? More certain than I've ever been about anything. Outside the medical bay, Celeste waited with barely concealed frustration. Your Majesty, surely you're not considering... Schedule a private meeting with the Constitutional Council, Lyra interrupted. I want to know exactly what legal mechanisms exist for royal marriage approval. Lyra, be reasonable. This man is nobody. No family, no wealth, no connections. What possible political advantage? He's somebody who was willing to die for strangers. Somebody who kept hope alive in a Kethvar mining camp. Somebody who saw an impossible situation and found a solution no one else could imagine. Liara started walking toward her quarters. Perhaps those qualities matter more than bloodlines. The nobles will revolt. Let them try. As she entered her private chambers, Liara reflected on the day's impossible events. A maintenance worker had reached her bridge, proposed marriage, and saved the human race, not necessarily in order of importance. Traditional thinking would label Marcus Webb as dangerous, unstable, completely unsuitable, but traditional thinking would have condemned 7 million people to death, rather than trust a former prisoner's desperate plan. The Constitutional Council convened an emergency session within the palace's most secure chamber. 7 elderly advisors in formal robes sat around an ancient oak table, reviewing legal precedents that hadn't been examined for centuries. Lord Chancellor Blackwood, a stern man with silver hair, addressed Queen Liara directly. Your Majesty, the law is quite clear. Royal marriages require approval from this council, the Parliament, and the heads of at least 6 major noble houses. What are the criteria for approval? Bloodline compatibility, political advantage, financial stability, and moral character. Blackwood consulted thick volumes of constitutional law. Mr. Webb fails 3 of 4 requirements. Lady Morgana Cross, youngest council member at 63, leaned forward. However, there is precedent for exceptional service to the crown, superseding traditional requirements. Explain. During the Tau Ceti Rebellion, King Edward III married a commoner who'd saved his life. Parliament approved the union after she demonstrated political acumen and bore an heir. Cross smiled thinly. Of course, that was 400 years ago. Chancellor Blackwood frowned. The political landscape was entirely different then. We face different challenges now, maintaining unity among the colonies, managing relationships with alien species, preventing economic collapse after 3 years of war. Which brings us to Mr. Webb's unique qualifications, Liara said calmly. He possesses intimate knowledge of Kethvar technology and operations. His insights could prove invaluable in post-war negotiations. If there are post-war negotiations, Counselor Harrison interjected, the Kethvar fleet is crippled but not destroyed. They may regroup and attack again. All the more reason to value expertise over tradition. The debate continued for hours. Constitutional scholars parsing ancient laws while politicians calculated contemporary consequences. Lyra listened patiently, but her mind kept returning to Marcus's words. Sometimes you have to take risks that make everyone think you're crazy. Your Majesty, Lady Cross finally said, we've identified a potential path forward. Royal engagement can be announced pending completion of certain requirements. Political education, security clearance, demonstration of leadership capability. Trial period, Chancellor Blackwood added reluctantly. 6 months to prove suitability. If Mr. Desert State declares the intensity that parasynthoids is myth, Webb succeeds, the marriage proceeds. If not, I withdraw the proposal and select a more traditional candidate. Liara stood. Draft the necessary documents. The next morning, Marcus had recovered enough to walk. Liara found him in the palace gardens, staring at Earth's blue sky with visible wonder. 2 years of artificial lighting in Kethvar mines had left him pale and unsteady in natural sunlight. How do you feel? Like I'm dreaming and might wake up any moment. He turned to face her, noting the formal court dress she wore. That looks like official business attire. It is. The Constitutional Council has approved a conditional engagement. 6 months to prove your suitable royal consort material. Marcus blinked. Conditional engagement. That sounds ominous. You'll undergo political education, security training, public speaking lessons, diplomatic protocol instruction, and various other tortures that come with royal position. Liara walked to a marble bench overlooking the rose garden. You'll also be assigned a security detail, have your every movement monitored, and endure constant media scrutiny. And at the end of 6 months, if you've demonstrated competence and haven't been assassinated or driven insane, we marry and you become Prince Consort Marcus of the Human Crown. Marcus sat beside her, careful to maintain appropriate distance. What if I fail the tests? Then you return to civilian life with full honors, a pension, and my gratitude for saving 7 million people. But not your hand in marriage. But not my hand in marriage. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Gardner's 10 flower beds that had survived war and siege. Marcus finally spoke. What do you want me to say? What do you mean? I mean, this is clearly a political compromise. Your advisors found a way to honor your word without actually committing to anything permanent. Smart politics. He looked at her directly. But what do you want me to say? The question surprised her with its directness. Most courtiers spoke in layers of hidden meaning and careful implication. Marcus simply asked what he wanted to know. I want you to understand what you're agreeing to. Being Prince Consort isn't a reward. It's a lifetime of service, more demanding than anything you experienced in those mines. You'll never have privacy, never make decisions purely for yourself, never be just Marcus Webb again. And you want me to choose that willingly, with full understanding of the cost? Yes. Marcus stood and walked to the garden's edge, where the palace walls looked out over the capital city. Millions of people moved through streets rebuilt after Catharvar bombardment, their lives slowly returning to normalcy because of decisions made in throne rooms and council chambers. I've been thinking about something you said yesterday, about dying for them instead of for a dream. He gestured toward the city. Maybe the dream and the reality aren't as different as I thought. Explain. For 2 years I dreamed of being worthy of someone like you, But you're not just someone. You're the person responsible for all those lives down there. Marrying you means accepting responsibility for them too. Liara joined him at the wall. That's exactly what it means. Then yes, I accept the conditions. The announcement of Princess Liara's conditional engagement sent shockwaves through human space. News feeds carried endless speculation about the unknown hero who'd destroyed the Kethavar dreadnought and won the Queen's hand. Political analysts debated constitutional precedent while gossip columnists dissected every detail of Marcus's background. Public opinion is split, Celeste reported during the weekly briefing. 53% support the engagement, 31% oppose it, 16% undecided. Rural worlds favor the match, urban centers lean against. Liara reviewed polling data, while Marcus studied diplomatic protocols at another table. His political education had begun immediately. 16 hours daily of instruction in economics, law, military strategy, and interstellar relations. Opposition arguments? She asked. Concerns about precedent, questions regarding his qualifications, fears that unconventional leadership choices indicate instability. Celeste paused. There's also organized resistance from noble houses who expected marriage consideration. Let them sulk. What about the Kethavar situation? Their surviving ships have withdrawn to the Kappa Reticuli system. Intelligence suggests internal political chaos following the dreadnought's destruction. The faction that advocated war appears to be losing influence. Marcus looked up from his studies. The Warhawks were led by military caste prime Thekval. If he died aboard the dreadnought, the peace caste might regain control of their government. Both women stared at him. Celeste consulted her intelligence reports. That information isn't in any of our briefing materials. I told you. 2 years in their mining camps. You hear things. The guards didn't think human prisoners could understand their language. Marcus returned to his reading. The Kethval was obsessed with human expansion into what he considered sacred space. Without him driving military policy, the Kethval might actually negotiate. Liara exchanged glances with Celeste. What else did you hear? Enough to know that this war was never really about territory or resources. It was about fear. Their fear that humanity represents something they can't understand or control. Marcus closed the protocol manual, which is why your marriage choice matters to more than just constitutional lawyers. Meaning that other species are watching to see how humanity handles success. Do we become rigid and hierarchical like the Kethvar, or do we stay flexible and adaptive? He stood. Marrying a commoner sends a message about what kind of civilization we're building. The insight surprised Lara. In 3 weeks of intensive education, Marcus had absorbed not just facts, but their deeper implications. His perspective remained unique, informed by suffering but tempered by hope. The Altarian delegation requests an audience next week, Celeste noted. They're concerned about human expansionism following the Kethvar defeat. Grant the audience, and include Marcus in the meeting. Your Majesty, he hasn't completed diplomatic training. He has experience they don't. Sometimes unconventional perspectives see solutions that traditional thinking misses. That evening, Liara found Marcus in the palace gymnasium, working through physical rehabilitation exercises with grim determination. Radiation damage had weakened his cardiovascular system, requiring careful conditioning to restore normal function. How are you feeling? Like someone disassembled me at the molecular level and put me back together with a few pieces missing. Marcus completed another set of resistance exercises. But I'm improving. The medical staff says you're healing faster than expected. Stubborn genes. He toweled off perspiration, studying her expression. You look concerned. Today's briefing raised interesting questions about your time with the Kethvar. Information that could be strategically valuable. Marcus nodded slowly. You want me to provide detailed intelligence reports about their military capabilities, political structure, and cultural weaknesses? It would help our negotiating position, and it would mean betraying the guards who occasionally showed kindness to human prisoners. Not many, but some. Marcus sat on a weight bench, choosing his words carefully. I can give you tactical information that helps prevent future wars, but I won't provide intelligence designed to exploit or dominate them. Even though they enslaved you, especially because they enslaved me. I know what it feels like to be powerless. I won't help humanity become the next oppressor species." Liara sat across from him, recognizing another test in this moment. "And if I insist, then you'll learn something important about the man you're considering marrying." The quiet conviction in his voice reminded her of their first meeting, the same moral certainty that had driven him to volunteer for a suicide mission. Marcus Webb possessed something rare in political circles: genuine principles. "The Altarian meeting next week," she said finally. "I want your perspective, but I also want you to observe their cultural dynamics, learn how other species conduct diplomacy. Dr. Marcus." She paused at the gymnasium entrance. "Thank you for being honest about the intelligence issue. Thank you for not making it a command." The Altarian delegation arrived with typical ceremony: flowing robes, complex greeting rituals, and an air of ancient wisdom that slightly intimidated most humans. Their ambassador, a tall being with silver skin and luminous golden eyes, spoke in measured tones about interstellar stability. "The defeat of the Kethvar marks a significant shift in regional power balance," Ambassador Veltar explained. "The Altarian Confederation seeks assurance that humanity will not pursue aggressive expansion into former Kethvar territories." "We have no territorial ambitions beyond our current borders," Lyra replied. "Our goal is peaceful coexistence. Yet humanity's rapid technological development and military capabilities suggest potential for future conflict. How does the Crown propose to address these concerns?" Marcus had remained silent throughout the formal proceedings, but now he leaned forward slightly. "Ambassador, may I ask about Altairean perspectives on adaptive governance?" Veltar's golden eyes fixed on him with obvious surprise. "Adaptive governance? The ability of a civilization to evolve its institutions and practices in response to changing circumstances, as opposed to rigid hierarchical structures that resist change. An interesting concept. What prompts this inquiry? The assumption that military capability necessarily leads to aggressive expansion. In Altairean history, has adaptive governance ever prevented such outcomes?" Ambassador Veltar exchanged glances with his advisors. "Indeed, the Confederation survived the collapse of 3 predecessor empires by maintaining flexible institutional structures. But humanity is young. Your species lacks the historical experience to manage such transitions peacefully." "Perhaps," Marcus agreed. "But we also lack the historical prejudices that prevent established species from recognizing new possibilities." The conversation continued for another hour, but Lyra noticed a subtle shift in tone. Marcus's questions had reframed the discussion from humanity's potential threat level to broader questions of interstellar governance innovation. By the meeting's end, Ambassador Veltar was discussing mutual research initiatives rather than containment strategies. "Impressive!" Celeste murmured as the Altarian delegation departed. "He turned defensive negotiations into cooperative planning. Natural talent or careful preparation?" Liara asked. "Both. He spent 3 days studying Altarian history and philosophy." Celeste smiled. "I'm beginning to understand why you're considering this marriage." That night, Lara walked through the palace's private quarters, reflecting on 6 months that had transformed her perspective on leadership, tradition. Marcus had exceeded every expectation while challenging every assumption about royal marriage and political advantage. Tomorrow, the Constitutional Council would render its final verdict on his suitability as Prince Consort. The vote would be close. Chancellor Blackwood remained skeptical, while younger council members increasingly supported the match. She found Marcus in the observatory, studying star charts of the local galactic region. Red markers indicated Kethvar positions, blue marked human territories, and green showed neutral species, like the Altarians. "Planning our next diplomatic crisis?" she asked. Trying to understand the larger pattern, 3 species in this sector: humans, Kethvar, and Altarians, all following different evolutionary paths. Aggressive expansion, rigid hierarchy, and adaptive cooperation. And I think the universe is conducting an experiment to see which approach produces sustainable civilization. Lyra studied the star map, seeing familiar territory through his eyes. What's your hypothesis? That survival requires elements of all three approaches, but balanced through institutions that can evolve. Aggression when threatened, hierarchy when coordination is essential, cooperation when possible. The Constitutional Council votes tomorrow. Marcus nodded. Whatever they decide, these 6 months have been extraordinary. I've learned more about governance and diplomacy than I ever imagined possible. And if they approve the marriage, then I spend the rest of my life trying to justify their confidence. Liara moved closer to the star chart, studying the complex relationships between species and territories. What convinced you that this was worth pursuing? Really? Marcus turned from the display. That moment on your bridge, when you were willing to sacrifice 800 people to save 7 million, the weight of that decision, the responsibility you carry, I realized that true leadership means accepting impossible choices and living with the consequences. It also means accepting that you'll never be loved for yourself alone. Every relationship becomes political. Every friendship carries ulterior motives. Every moment of privacy is stolen from duties that never end. Yes, but it also means having the power to protect people who can't protect themselves, to make decisions that shape the future of human civilization, to stand between chaos and order. They stood together in the observatory, surrounded by the vast expanse of space where billions of lives hung in the balance of political decisions. Tomorrow would bring either the beginning of an unprecedented partnership or the end of an impossible dream. Marcus, Liara said quietly, if the council approves the marriage, are you prepared for what comes next? A lifetime of service to humanity, shared with the most remarkable woman I've ever met. He smiled. Yes, Your Majesty. I'm ready. The Constitutional Council's vote was 4-3 in favor of approving the marriage. Chancellor Blackwood's opposition had been expected, but Lady Cross's eloquent argument about the necessity of institutional evolution had swayed 2 undecided members. Within hours, Parliament ratified the decision by a narrow majority. Marcus Webb, former mining prisoner and maintenance worker, would become Prince Consort in 3 days' time. The wedding ceremony took place in the Great Hall, witnessed by representatives from across human space and several allied species. Traditional protocols had been modified to accommodate the bridegroom's common birth, a symbolic acknowledgement that humanity's future would require new approaches to ancient institutions. As Marcus spoke his vows, promising to serve both Crown and humanity with unwavering dedication, Liara reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A desperate battle, an impossible proposal, 6 months of political maneuvering, and countless small choices that had led to this larger decision. Do you, Marcus Webb, take Queen Lyra as your wife and sovereign, accepting all duties and burdens of the royal consort? I do. Do you, Queen Lyra, take Marcus Webb as your husband and partner, acknowledging him as Prince Consort and co-guardian of humanity's future? I do. The words carried weight beyond their ceremonial meaning. They represented a civilization's willingness to evolve, to embrace change rather than cling to outdated traditions. As the couple exchanged rings forged from metal salvaged from the destroyed Kethvar dreadnought, the symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. 3 days later, the first joint communication from the royal couple reached Kethvar space. It proposed formal peace negotiations based on mutual respect rather than territorial conquest. The response, when it came, expressed cautious interest in discussions. Ambassador Veltar attended the negotiation sessions as a neutral mediator, later commenting that humanity's unconventional approach to leadership had created unprecedented diplomatic possibilities. Other species began requesting similar innovative partnerships with human colonies, but perhaps the most significant outcome was quieter, less dramatic. In the months following the royal wedding, applications to join the human colonial service increased by 300%. Young people across human space had seen that merit and courage could triumph over tradition and privilege. Marcus and Liara worked together in the palace's command center, reviewing proposals for post-war reconstruction while monitoring diplomatic developments across the sector. Their partnership had evolved from impossible romance to practical collaboration, strengthening both institutions and individuals. The Proxima Centauri colony requests permission to establish a university focused on interspecies relations, Marcus reported. They want to study adaptive governance models. Approved. What else? The Kethvar Peacecast has formally requested human assistance in redesigning their mining operations to eliminate slave labor. They're offering technological exchanges in return. Liara smiled. That particular irony isn't lost on me. Former mining prisoner becomes consultant on prison reform. Former mining prisoner becomes prince consort and changes the course of interstellar relations. As they worked through the endless details of governance, neither Marcus nor Liara dwelt on the romantic improbability of their union. They had found something more valuable than fairy tale love. They had found purpose, partnership, and the satisfaction of building something larger than themselves. The maintenance worker who had dared to propose to a queen had achieved his impossible goal, but more importantly, he had helped humanity evolve beyond the limitations of tradition and hierarchy. In reaching for what seemed unattainable, Marcus Webb had discovered that the greatest rewards often come not from achieving personal dreams, but from expanding the possibilities for entire civilizations. The stars that had once seemed impossibly distant now beckoned with promise rather than threat, and at the center of human space, a queen and her unlikely consort worked together to ensure that humanity's greatest adventure still lay ahead.